is feeling very emboldened after the last 2 days? Ready to go back and take it all into your work and into your life? Oh, that was pretty pathetic. I think there was about 7 people with their hand up there. Okay, good. You know, it's been a long day today. I got here this morning and I was like, okay, ready to go. So, I'm really honoured to be the closing speaker here, and when I was asked by Kathy to do this, I said, are you sure you want me to do this? She said, yes, I am. So I really had to dial up my own courage and step over my own fear over the last few hours, because I've been pulled into what I think so many speakers do, and that's making negative comparisons, where you go, oh God, I can't juggle, and I can't do backflips, and I can't do a handstand on that thing. And so, you know, I believe, and it's my life experience, and as Andreas just said, that the biggest thing that gets in the way of us making the biggest mark that we can, of speaking into the future, of being better together, is this deep-seated fear that if we try, we may fall short, that we may be judged and found wanting, that we may be rejected, that we won't have what it takes. And so it's my passion to help people rise above their fears so they can live their full potential. And I know that in this room, and I have to say, it is such a huge honour, if not a slightly terrifying one, to have a room filled with so many people who have such a deep sense of purpose in their work. I know that every one of you feels passionate about what you do, and all of you have so much wisdom and knowledge and skill to share. And so what does it take for you to ultimately make the biggest mark that you are capable of making? So you can see here I have a horse. My horse, Robbie, that's me in my ABBA Gold t-shirt. You might notice that. When I grew up on a farm, as you just heard, and when I was coming up to about my 10th birthday, I said to my dad, you know, would it be possible to get a horse? Now, my father milked cows for nearly 50 years. He left school when he was 15. My mother, she also left school when she was 15, and I'll share a little bit more about that backstory of Mum in a minute. But I remember my dad, I wanted a pony, and I got this horse, and it was a bit bigger than I thought, and I remember kind of looking up at him and thinking, it's not quite as, you know, the size I was after, but my parents, you know, money was pretty tight on the farm. So my dad always thought, buy shoes 2 sizes too big, buy clothes 2 sizes too big, buy a horse a few sizes too big, the kids can grow into it. So every morning I would get out there and I would bridle up Robbie and I would saddle him up, and over the course of a year I got pretty good at riding Robbie. And what I learnt over the course of that year was that, you know, I needed a horse that was a bit faster, so I started to pester my dad, could I get a faster horse? Could I get a faster horse? Because he just doesn't go very fast. And money was tight. Dad didn't have enough money to buy a second horse. But he did go in a raffle. It was a raffle for New Year's Day. It was a horse that was being raffled, and it was 20 cents a ticket or 6 for $1. By this stage, there were 6 kids in the family. And I prayed, I went to church, I said, dear God, please let me win that horse, please let me win that horse. And would you believe it? Faith of a child. We won my second horse. Yeah. Now, have you ever heard of the saying, don't look a gift horse in the mouth? Well, he wasn't an old horse, but he went 2 speeds, 0 and 100 miles an hour in about 5 seconds. And so I had to dial up my courage all over again. But what I learned from learning to ride my second horse was that growth and comfort can't ride the same horse. And you know, as we talk about what does the future look like for speakers and what is it going to take for all of us to create a future that is one where there is less suffering and more opportunity, it's going to take each of us to find our own courage, to step outside our own comfort zone, and to do the things that scare us. Yesterday, Tanvi asked you all, who wants to be on the cutting edge? And nearly the whole room's hands went up. And then, you know, who wants to be on the bleeding edge? Well, maybe not so much. But the fact is that when you're out there doing the things that you need to do, sometimes that's going to be really uncomfortable and sometimes you're going to bleed, as she said. And the fact is, as humans, we live with a psychic tug of war. We have a psychic tug of war between the desire to stay safe and to stay comfortable and to stay secure and not to make a fool of ourselves. And there's desire to keep up a good appearance and to look good in front of others and not to risk failure and judgment. And then on the other side of that, the desire for growth, the desire for learning, the desire to live a life that matters and to make a difference and to use our gifts and to use our struggles in ways that serve the world. And, you know, as Natalie said yesterday, you know, we were born for times like this. We are living in uncertain times. We are living in volatile times. Truth is under threat. And the fact is that unless we're willing to challenge ourselves and to embrace our own vulnerability, we're not going to be able to do what it is we're capable of doing. And the world needs what you have to bring, every one of you. And you know what every one of you have to bring is different from what everyone else has to bring. And so I'm going to share with you 5 pillars that I believe are so crucial for us to step up to the plate as speakers, as trainers, as coaches, as whatever you want to call yourself. And I don't mind if you call yourself a keynoter. Sorry, Jeremy. To actually do what you're capable of doing. So, firstly, what does that take? I believe it takes really actively on a daily basis, choosing growth over comfort. You know, our brains are wired. There's a lot of research now, they can scan our brains. Our brains are twice as sensitive to potential losses as they are to potential gains. That is, when we're thinking of making a decision, do I put my hand up, do I speak up, do I change my talk around, and you know, do I reinvent it? We're twice as sensitive to what could go wrong and what we could lose as to what could go right and what we could gain, and also what we could give. And in line with that, we tend to come up with worst case scenarios, we tend to overestimate the risks, and we tend to underestimate ourselves, particularly women. And it was funny listening to Andrew's talk this morning. He was saying, you know, it can't be that hard. And I said to him afterwards, I said, you know, I've found men, and this isn't, I'm not having a go at the guys here, but it's my experience that men are more likely to be overconfident than women. As women, I think we tend to doubt ourselves too much, back ourselves too little. And we're less likely to say, hey, I'm brilliant at this, and then realize, oh, maybe I'm not as good as I thought. And so for you, recognizing where does fear sit in the driver's seat? Where is fear calling the shots? Maybe in ways that you aren't even present to. You know, we are wired, yes, for security and for certainty and for safety. And the problem is that once those basic needs are met, the need to make a difference and to live a life that matters and to continually grow is going to find ourselves coming up against that force of fear, but what if I fail? And, you know, given that we live in an age that is hyper-connected, we are more connected today through technology than ever before in human history. And as Andreas just said, you know, we often underestimate the impact of technology on our lives over the longer term. Well, today, more people feel lonely and disconnected than ever before. In fact, the rates of loneliness are higher than ever before. More and more people have a deep, deep sense of isolation. And that's why as speakers, it's not just our responsibility to speak from a place of authenticity, to come from the heart. It's actually our obligation. And as so many speakers have said over the last few days, we are not here to say, hey, aren't I good, let me tell you about how great I am. We're actually here to serve. And we cannot serve other people to the extent we're capable of when we're focused on protecting our identity, when we're focused on, how am I going to look? And yes, sales and marketing is absolutely important. I couldn't agree more. But too often we get too stuck in what is in it for me and how am I looking, and our desire to look good can get in the way of our desire to do good. And too often we're not even present to where fear and self-doubt is ultimately just another form of fear, gets in the way of us from daring to do things and trying things and putting ourselves out there, whatever out there means. So this talk was called Train the Brave, and that's because courage is like a muscle. And the more often you do the things that scare you, that are uncomfortable for you, the less power fear has in your life and the more you grow your own. And I believe as humans, we are way more powerful than we generally give ourselves credit for. And for you, you're not a speaker or a trainer or a coach or a consultant or a keynoter. What you are is a change agent. I mean, at the core of it all, we're change agents. We're here to make an impact, to change things for the better. And my definition of power is our ability to affect change. And we cannot do that if we're not continually challenging ourselves and laying our vulnerability on the line for something that's more important than that. So if you haven't found yourself feeling uncomfortable for a while, where do you need to dial up your own courage? I fell off my horse so many times that I lost count. I'm not sure if I lost a few brain cells as well. But the truth is that if you're not having those falls, if you're not making mistakes, if you're not trying things and not nailing it, then you're playing it too safe. And it's very easy to play it too safe. That's what we're wired to do. We're psychologically wired to avoid putting ourselves in situations where we'll feel emotional, psychological discomfort. And so, what does it take to find the guts, to get outside your comfort zone, to put yourself out there? Well, having listened to Deli yesterday morning, I mean, what a talk from a young woman doing something that's really big, a big mission. But all of us have a mission. We're all here to do something great. And you have to be able to answer the question, for the sake of what am I willing to put myself out there? And unless you can answer that question, for the sake of what am I willing to be brave, then why would you bother? Millions of people, millions and hundreds of millions of people live lives of immaculate mediocrity. I lived in the suburbs of Dallas once. I know that. And a lot of people put a lot of energy into looking really, really, really good, but they're not doing what it is they're capable of. And the research shows that when people have a clear sense of purpose in their lives, that they are committed to a cause, to something that's bigger than protecting their ego and looking good and having a lovely, comfortable life, people who are committed to that, not only are they more resilient, and not only are they able to weather life's storms better and emerge from those storms better off, not only are they more courageous and more willing to take risks, but they're also far happier, more contented people. They find meaning in the present moment. And so I'm sure many of you do have a strong sense of mission already, but if you haven't sat down and really articulated, what do you want your life to stand for? 60 years from now, 70, okay, maybe 100 years from now, we're all dead, unless there's some massive breakthrough in technology. We will not be here. What is the legacy that you're going to leave? What is the legacy that you would love to leave? So create for yourself a vision that's bigger than your current capacity to achieve it. Connect to a calling. There was a great study done a few years ago, and they asked people, are you doing a job, a career, or a calling? And interestingly enough, it was about a third, and a third. People who see what they do as a calling are more successful people. And I know for me, someone asked me a little bit early just in the break, Margie, so what started you into doing speaking in the first place? And I had grown up on the farm. I left my parents' home when I was 18 to go to university. I studied business. It sounded good. I got a marketing degree. My dad thought that equipped me to work in a market. I wasn't quite sure why you needed to study for 3 years. But I went off and I was working in marketing in the corporate world. But I developed bulimia through my teenage years on the farm. I read about it in a magazine and as a way to lose weight. I thought it sounded like a good idea. Ended up turning into a pretty significant eating disorder and really kicked into full steam when I left home at 18 and I was at university. I was 100% on my own financially, pretty much in every way. And it was in my 20s that I started to really look at, address, like, how do I find myself in this cycle when I'm intelligent? Why can't I stop it? And I got introduced to the works of Wayne Dyer and Marianne Williamson and Scott Peck. And I was like this whole new awakening, and I thought, I want to be like these people. And I went back to university in my late 20s to study psychology then. And I thought, maybe I'll become a psychologist. And then I was moving around, I started having children, and someone said to me, you should look at coaching. That would be a great profession for you because it brings in your business background, your consulting background, and your desire to help people with that. And I'm like, coaching sounds great. And then I found myself moving to the United States. I packed up my house the day after 9/11, 12th of September 2001. I had an 8-week-old, a 2-year-old, and a 3-year-old, and we moved to Dallas, Texas. God bless my heart. And I had a really hard time landing there, meeting people. And when I got there, though, I decided, I really want to continue with this whole new career direction. And I trained as a coach, but I didn't know anybody, no one. And I thought, how am I going to get any business? So I went out and I started to give free talks. And I have to disagree with Jeremy on the free speaking because I'm telling you, if I'd waited till I was paid, I would never have got a talk. I'd never have done one. And so my first ever talk, my kids were at a little preschool, and I said, can I do a talk for the working mums on work-life balance? Because that was the only thing I felt like I was equipped to do, not that. And she said, sure, and she put this flyer up for a few weeks, and then on the night of the talk, I got there, I had all my notes elaborate, I'd like totally over-prepared, and I got there and I went into the room, and it was her, the director of the preschool, and the janitor, and I'm sure she made her stay back because she felt bad that she would have been the only person in the audience. And I stood there, and they were sitting on the seats that little 3-year-olds sit on, and I stood there and gave them my talk on success as a balancing act. And let's just say it probably wasn't my finest hour. I'm glad it wasn't being filmed. But I share that with you because if I had waited until I knew what I was doing, I wouldn't have ever started. But my mission was to help people, even though no one at that point really wanted my help. And so I encourage you to set a bold course for yourself. Set a vision, one that, really lights you up. Because we fail more from timidity than we do from over-daring. And unless you are clear about why you need to put yourself out there and be bold and be brave, why would you bother? Why would you bother? So for the sake of what are you willing to be brave? What is it that is so important to you? And there are many... Are we there? Okay. There are so many important causes in the world, and there is so much suffering in the world. And by very virtue of the fact that we're in this room together, we are the 1%. We are so privileged. We are so blessed. We have so much to give. And we have, I believe, an obligation to give it. I was raised in a Catholic household. My mother left school and she joined the convent and was a nun for 9 years. And after 9 years, is anyone wondering what order she met my dad in when the 7 kids happened? Yeah. So it's a little bit of a Sound of Music story. So Mum decided then it wasn't what she was called to do, and she left the convent, met my father, and got married, and not long after started having a large family. And so when I was about 13, I remember saying to my mum and dad, I'd really like to be like Jan Event. She was an Australian journalist with 60 Minutes. And I said, I'd just love to be like Jan Event. And Mum said, oh, darling, you can't be a journalist. You don't really know what's going on in the world. You don't read the paper. And I said, but Mum, I'd really like to. And she goes, no, darling, you have to know what's going on in politics. So I kind of like, I guess I can't be a journalist. And then it was about a week or so later, my dad said, Margaret Mary, very Catholic, Margaret Mary, I see great things for you. I'm like, do you, Dad? He said, I see you being Sister Margaret Mary, in charge of a convent. I'd been thinking Princess Diana and Meryl Streep, but no. It was years later I found this photo. My parents had started trying to groom us young. That's my brother, Pope Francis. That's me. Now, I was never called to the convent, but what I can tell you is that I think all of us are called to do something bigger. And so what is that? We've got to step up and risk exposure in order to do that. And so for each of you, as you think about where do I need to risk more exposure, and what do I mean by that? I mean, every time we get up as speakers, we are risking exposure because there's 300 people in this, 250 people in this room who will be making judgments, will be making assessments. No, she was good at that, she wasn't so good at that, right? That's what it is. And so we have to be very clear, one, it's not about us. It's about who we are here to serve. But also, while there's a lot of pressure in the superficial society that we live in, the Insta society, the selfie, we can Photoshop and airbrush everything, the reality is that we connect far more deeply through our vulnerability and through our struggles and through the times we've fallen short and we've failed to be the person that we most want to be, than through our victories and our triumphs and, hey, aren't I fantastic? That's not to say you don't own that, but really from the stage, when we connect from that heart space, what comes from the heart lands on the heart. And I have seen, I started speaking in the USA. As you could tell, it was a humble beginning, 2 people in my audience in my kids' preschool. But over time, I got out there and spoke a lot more, and after a while, someone said, how much do you charge? I'm like, oh my God, I could get paid. And I said, I felt like Austin Powers in that movie. $200, I said. And they said, great, that's great. I was thinking, oh, they said great so quickly. I wonder. And then after a while, that grew and grew, and I decided to write a book. And then writing that book, I self-published it because I was pretty much a no-name life coach. But that opened the door to a whole lot of other opportunities over time. But so when you think about what does it take for you to step into your power and risk that exposure, I believe really our power, our maximum power, lies at the intersection of one, what is your focus? What is the highest intention you're trying to serve? So your mission sits at the top of that. But are you focused on using your strengths? Focus on using your gifts. Focus on using your talents. Focus on using the learning you've got from your hard-won wisdom. If you're not incorporating into your programs your hard-won wisdom from the times you've fallen short and fallen flat on your face, then people are missing out on some of the greatest value that you have to bring. Not on the times you nailed it, but the times you didn't nail it. I had the opportunity to interview Richard Branson a few years ago. And I asked him, what have you learned from your failures? And he said, my failures have taught me twice as much as my success ever has. He said, but I make sure never to miss one iota of learning from failure. And so often when we try something and we fail, we kind of get caught up into, that we beat ourselves up. But what is there for you to learn from that failure? So one, focus on what it is you want to create more of, what you want to do more of, what's within your power, not what isn't. Secondly, what's your story? What's the story you're telling yourself about? And too often we live in a story, it's like a straitjacket. It hems us in from doing what we're capable of doing. Now, I know I'm in a room full of people who are, many of you, mindset experts, and you have your own background in psychology and how do we think powerfully. But the power of story, and when next time you find yourself up against a challenge or a problem or a challenging problem people, anyone know any of those? Are they next to you? Okay. Just ask yourself, what's another story I could tell myself now? And finally, our physiology. I want you all just to stand up just for a moment. Earlier today, Mariana talked about Amy Cuddy's TED Talk and some of the science being debunked, but let me just say this. Your physiology impacts your psychology. And the truth is that when how we hold ourselves impacts the emotions that we feel and then the actions that we take. So I want you all just to close your eyes just for a moment. I want you to put your hand on your heart. I want you to take a big deep breath, couple right into the bottom of your belly. And I want you to imagine out 5 years from now, I want you to picture what your ultimate vision of success would look like, however you define it. What would you be doing? How would you be utilizing your strengths and your gifts in the most powerful way? Who would be so grateful for the way you have stepped up and been purposeful and courageous in how you have lived your life? How would you be feeling about your future ahead of you? What would you be feeling most proud of? Just connect with those emotions. What would you have overcome? Think about what you would be most grateful for 5 years from now. Just let your imagination run wild and really connect with the ultimate highest vision for your life and the lives that you would have impacted by you being the bravest and boldest and most purposeful and big-hearted version of yourself. Now, I want you to think of a challenge that you have coming up, or an opportunity or a goal that you've got coming up in the short term. And I want you to, from that space of connecting with your own inner brave heart, I want you to imagine yourself taking on that challenge, stepping toward that goal with a deep, deep, deep belief in your own ability to rise above whatever challenges you have, and to really live the siren call of your own soul and whatever it is that sets your heart on fire. I want you to imagine yourself in that moment doing something in an incredibly powerful, purposeful way that brings the full quota of what you have to bring to the table. And now I want you to imagine yourself with a little circle around you, and inside, you're standing inside your comfort zone, and if you take a step forward, you step outside of it. And even if it's a small step, I want you just to take a small step forward right now, out of your comfort zone and toward what's possible. Now I want you just to anchor in that emotion you're feeling. Picture that moment of success and victory as you rose above whatever was in your way. Anchor that in to your heart. And now I invite you just to open up your eyes, and to two people around you, give them a high five and say, "You've got this." You know, the fact is that it is in your struggle that you can become who it is you're capable of being. We are human beings, we are human becomings. And it takes a lifetime to become all we're capable of becoming. But we have to embrace those moments of struggle and the moments of setback and the times where you go, oh, do I have what it takes, and will I ever be able to do it? And to step through that and to recognize that adversity introduces us to ourselves. Within you is potential. William James said most people live in a very restricted circle of their potential. You have no idea what you're capable of. I look back to when I had 4 little kids living in Coppell, Texas, thinking, who am I to do this? As Tammy said yesterday, who do you think you are? Who the hell do you think you are? I had a lot of, who the hell do I think I am? But as Marianne Williamson wrote in her famous words that were in her book, A Return to Love, who are you not to be fabulous and gorgeous and wonderful and brilliant? Who are you not to pursue the biggest vision for your life? Because the world needs you to do that. And what it doesn't need you to do is to get stuck into comparisons, looking at anybody else in this room and going, oh, but look at that person, they're so good at this, or that guy juggles and stands upside down on podiums, or that woman over there, she was such a brilliant, Mariana this morning, her ability, her acting, her skill there, her performance was fantastic. And I'm sure that everyone who got on stage in the last few days, you could go, whoa, gee, look at that, look at that, look at that. forget what everyone else is doing. And I know we're supposed to be looking at, competition and be number one and blah, blah, blah. Just be number one in your own category. Forget being number one in the world. Yes, fame, all of that stuff, but do the best you can with what you have. I would never have written my first book, which is now in 7 languages. I would never have got up and given a damn talk. I would never have started running my women's weekends. I would never have done any of the things that have been the most life-changing and profoundly rewarding, including having 4 kids, if I had waited until I knew that I would do it really, really, really well. And so give yourself permission not to do things brilliantly, recognizing that the desire for safety and for security and for looking good is always going to be in a tug of war with the desire for growth and for service and contribution. Every one of you can set off a ripple effect, and together, just in this room, what we're capable of doing in terms of creating a better future actually is beyond our comprehension. It's huge. And so I want to just close by sharing a quote, one of my favourite quotes. I never did get called to join the convent, but I have always been a huge admirer of Mother Teresa, who has now been made a saint. And she once said, give the world the best you've got, and it may not be enough. Give the world the best you've got anyway. And so on finishing this conference, I cannot encourage you enough to not let those doubts and those comparisons and that, I don't know if I've got what it takes and am I ever going to be, and I have to be more of this, put it all to the side. Connect into the vision that you created, connect into the power that's within you, and dare to do more than you think you can, because this world is hungry for what it is you have to bring. Thank you.